Hi, this is part one of grails-queuekit plugin. This is going to explain why you would use the plugin and what purpose it serves. The plugin can be found on this address. It's going to probably be part of the Grails plugins as well, and the name is QKit. So the purpose for it is if you have a Grails application which serves an application to a user base, and it may have a variety of different types of users, people that are using it to actually do stuff, and there are people that's using it to maybe do reports. So this plugin focuses on changing the way you do reports so that rather than if typically the purpose would be if you have reports that are generated when a user clicks a button or goes through a form and fills in information and they click a button to submit their information, and then that produces a downloadable file through the browser stream. So here's an example. I've clicked it, I'm waiting, it's going off to get something, I can click it again, I'm waiting, and multiply me by 100 times, and if we all sit there clicking, filling in forms and clicking all near enough at the same time, then that application can come to near enough a halt because of the process of your app using up the threads to go off and get stuff from the database and whatever else. So that means all the other users are going to suffer because of it. So that's what the purpose of this plugin is, to try and put some control over the reports functionality of your site. So both of these have now downloaded now, but as you can imagine, 100 times over is going to be bad. So typically what you would have is to generate that. So that product that was just produced for me was from something like this, where it set the response headers, set the file, set out, did a query through a service, returned the results, and then went through the iteration of the results listing and pumped it all into out and then closed it. And that would have produced us the file that you saw. And this is the file here. It's nothing special. It just produces IDs and just random text in a spreadsheet TSV file, right? And that could be a CSV or a TSV method that you'd do that. Now, if you were to use this plugin, what you would do is if you changed and you had this in place that did your reports, if you change this to be more like this, where you've got your response headers and you're out, because you're going to throw this part away, but you are going to keep this bit and you're going to keep this bit, because what we've done is we've moved this part of it into another function. We're passing out and query results and params into it, because as I said, you're going to throw away all this part and the out is going to be provided to you by the plugin. So you're going to need to separate out the bits for it to work properly through the plugin. So what you would do now is to change and add a few new stuff, the locale, the user ID, and we'd need the user ID, not the actual user at this point of your user, your params of your form, and then you'd call queue report service, which you inject into the controller, build report, report name. This is very important, and I'll speak about this in a second. User ID, locale, and params. Flash a message back out to say it's done it and render a page. The report name, if you call this params example, then what you need to do is, and make sure you don't use spaces, hyphens, underscores, dashes, anything funny, because basically the name will become a service, and that now becomes params example reporting service. You can use camel case like this, that's fine. Just remember, lowercase first character produces an uppercase first character when you produce a service, and that must extend this service. And in there I've declared my service that will produce the results, and query get queue priority you need to define, because basically this is what it does to check the priority of this current report running that's been executed or been asked for, and its parameters, and whether the priority that it has at the moment is correct. Now, regardless of whether you use a priority system or not, you need to declare this because this is an abstract method of this, and it must be declared, otherwise it complains or won't compile. So by default, you can put something like this in there. Run report is important again, and that gives you your so when you've declared all this, you then literally just call your service, and you just put params in, and that will be coming in through that call here. So that's your params there. That's coming in here now. That's calling your service, getting the results. Then you call run report, which is part of this again, and you pass it query results, which is the stuff that you've had and the params and the new stuff that you've got now. Run report will then go back into it and produce out, and then call action internal or through your bit of the code again, which basically you get back out being, which is your params, the listing, the locale, and then it's up to you to call your specific segment, which will then produce a report. And that's it. That once you've done that, it will produce reports for you. So if you were using it for XLS sheets, I mean, I'm using it for XLS and it works the same way. You would have something like this typically, and then at the end of it, you'd have something like this to set your response headers and write out the thing to the file. So these are the different types of outs that get written compared to this, which is your CSV, TSV types, compared to this, which writes the file. So if you were using it for these sort of files, you can again get rid of all of that, and you just have this in your service method that you do. So here's the controller, XLS example. This calls XLS example reporting service. Does the same thing. A more in-depth get queue priority based on the parameters would be in the front end, and define a new priority based on that, and you can do it as you like. This is just all stuff I've made up so that I can show you can get quite deep with it. Report name, I've overridden this from the main queue-based report service because that itself just generates a file in a specific manner. You can make it become whatever you like. Run report does the same thing, but here the only difference is, as you can see, as I've just explained, you just have that as the last bit which writes the file. And you get out back through the plugin, and the out then is decided to be a file type by the plugin because based on the report type. And once you've done that then obviously produces your report. So I'll show you some examples. So we've got in the plugin that's a report demo controller, which basically is what you can use as a starting point to get going. So probably if you're using params, I mean, all of the rest of them use beans, but if you're using params, then just follow this basic demo example, and that calls params example, which then we have a params example reporting service. And that's like I've just explained to you. That does that. Another thing I just quickly rushed over is the plugin also injects G back into the services, so you can do g.message in your custom calls. If you had it in your controller, it will continue to work in your custom service calls, just exactly like a controller would, which is basically one of the sort of issues of trying to do this sort of stuff in a service. I've tried to make it as easy, accessible as possible. So this is the params report, and I've just talked through that, and that binds into that. You can call the build report with the different priorities as well defined in it. So this is different methods that you can call, and you can just sort of go through the examples. And you can also use a bean to do it if you don't want to, declare loads of different values. You can use the bean and declare everything in the bean. If you use the bean method, you can also provide from action and from controller, and then that itself produces. So in here, we haven't run anything yet, but if I run one of these and run one of these, that will call index bean, which is this method here, right? one of them will have, I think they're both going to have the same file name because of the reports are the same thing that gets called. So I'm pumping out output. So on this one, you can see you've got a form that if you go back to, if you click it, this is a form and that's a get method, the same thing, and you can set the form action to be the form input action rather than the action that posts it. And this one doesn't have that information, so that was the difference between the two. So going back to the reason why you'd use this plugin, because I've sort of sidestepped again, sorry, is because so you have the problem obviously of loads of people clicking it. Through this system, you can manage it and queue things. So if I click on 1, 2, 3, being a lower priority, hopefully I should only be running 2 at the maximum. Where I've got three slots available, it should only be running 2. You can see here, all 3 are used. I'll have it's been playing up a little bit. I've done some changes and some stuff's slightly changed, but in effect, I was hoping to play that role. But at the moment, the maximum that's running is 3. And it's per user. At the moment, this is coming from an override to say that's me, but I'll show you in another video how you can make it bind into your application. So the reason why you'd use it is basically that you'd control the amount of reports that can run at any one time, and you can go through different methods of queuing mechanisms through thread executor that are provided through the plugin. And when people download stuff, this interface is basically created in a way that if I go to it and I'm logging in through my authentication system, then I'm only getting access to my reports, and another user going to would get access to their reports. And only if a user has super admin privileges, they get these admin actions that they can change the pool size of the actual executor that they use, and then they can change priority groups and flow control and stuff with thread executor, and they can search by other usernames as well, whereas with a normal user you don't get these options, and you can define that through a configuration, and we'll get to that in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.